A struggling single mother walked into Judge Caprio's courtroom carrying more weight than anyone in the room could see. She wasn't loud, she wasn't entitled, and she wasn't pretending the rules didn't apply to her. But the moment her case appeared on the screen, single mother charged with missed court and unpaid parking violations. The internet would soon explode with debate, sympathy, and disbelief. Minutes earlier, she had rushed into the courtroom apologizing under her breath, still catching her breath from a morning that clearly hadn't gone according to plan. And yet, despite her sincerity, a storm of tension was already brewing. Because today's story wasn't just about a missed court date. It was about how life's hardest moments test a person's dignity, and how compassion can reveal the truth behind someone's struggle. As she waited for her name to be called, she clutched her phone tightly, not out of disrespect, but because the babysitter kept texting her updates. To an untrained eye, it might have looked distracted. To Judge Caprio, it soon would mean something entirely different. And before this hearing ended, the entire courtroom would learn a truth millions online would later share. Sometimes the people who break the rules are the ones life has already broken first. Tell us where you're watching from. Stories like this hit home everywhere. It was just after 9 a.m. in Providence. The kind of morning where the city moved a little too fast for anyone already running behind. Inside the municipal courtroom, the air carried a familiar mix of quiet chatter, shuffling papers, and the soft echoes of footsteps on polished floors. Judge Caprio had just taken the bench, offering his usual warm greeting to the room. But beneath the calm, the bailiff leaned slightly toward him and whispered something brief. A subtle remark about the single mother who had rushed in moments earlier. She seemed nervous, Judge. Kept apologizing to everyone on her way in. Looks like she's had a morning. The judge simply nodded. Her file lay open in front of him. A missed court date for a small parking violation, now doubled because she hadn't appeared. This wasn't her first ticket. She had 2 prior warnings for expired meters near the hospital, both issued around the same time of day. Nothing major. Nothing unusual. Nothing malicious. But stress leaves fingerprints. As she waited on the wooden bench, she kept glancing at her phone, not scrolling, not browsing, just checking, over and over. Every few minutes, her thumb hovered over the screen with that specific tension only parents know, the kind that isn't disrespect, but worry. The bailiff noticed the way she'd entered earlier, hair slightly messy, jacket half-zipped, the unmistakable exhaustion of someone who woke up before the sun and still somehow felt late to life. She apologized to a clerk without even realizing she'd bumped into him. She whispered, "Sorry," again, to someone whose foot she almost stepped on, nervous, rushed, overwhelmed. And yet, a few people in the courtroom exchanged small glances, the kind that silently judged her for the missed hearing. To them, rules were simple. Show up, pay the fine, follow the schedule. But life isn't simple for everyone, and this morning, the quiet tension in the room suggested that empathy and procedure were about to collide once again inside Judge Caprio's courtroom. When the clerk finally called her name, the single mother stood up quickly. Too quickly. Almost dropping the phone she'd been clenching like a lifeline. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and stepped forward, trying to steady her breathing as she approached the bench. Judge Caprio greeted her with the same gentle tone he offered everyone. "Good morning, ma'am. How are you today?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. A nervous half-smile appeared. I'm okay, Your Honor. I'm sorry if I'm talking too fast. It's been a long morning." Her voice was respectful but shaky, a combination Judge Caprio had heard many times before. Before he could continue, Her phone buzzed loudly in her hand. A few people in the room shifted, annoyed. She quickly silenced it and whispered, "I'm sorry. I have my son with a sitter. I didn't want to miss anything." Her apology overlapped with the judge's next sentence, unintentionally cutting him off. The courtroom became still for a moment. Not hostile, just tense. Judge Caprio paused, then gave her a calm, fatherly look. "It's all right. Let's just take it one step at a time." But she spoke again too quickly, her anxiety spilling out. "I really didn't mean to miss the last court date. I swear I wasn't ignoring it. I had work, and my car, and my son was sick that day." Her words came out in a rapid tumble, as if she believed the more she explained now, the less she'd be judged later. But in her rush, she talked over the judge twice more, not out of defiance, but out of fear. Still, the courtroom felt the shift. A small sigh came from someone in the back. Another person rolled their eyes, assuming she was making excuses. The energy was no longer neutral. It was thick with impatience, misunderstanding, and quiet judgment. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses and waited for her to finish. He didn't interrupt. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held still in that firm, composed way that gently reminds everyone that this room runs on respect, even when emotions run high. When she finally paused to breathe, the judge spoke. "Ma'am, I promise you I will hear everything you have to say. But let's make sure we don't talk over each other. You'll get your turn, and I want to understand you clearly." Her shoulders dropped. The first crack in her armor of anxiety appeared. "Okay, I'm sorry, Your Honor." And just like that, the faintest battle line of the case was drawn. Not between arrogance and authority, but between her fear and his patience. Judge Caprio glanced down at her file again, preparing to explain the missed court date and the increased fine. But before he could begin, her phone buzzed a second time, louder this time, echoing through the quiet room. She winced, silenced it immediately, and whispered, "Sorry. Sorry." But to the rest of the courtroom, it didn't matter that she was anxious or overwhelmed. All they heard was a disruption. The judge tried to continue. "Ma'am, you were scheduled to appear—" She interrupted without meaning to. I know, I should have come. I'm not trying to get out of anything." A murmur rose from the back rows. Judge Caprio lifted a hand gently. "Let me finish, please." She nodded quickly, but her fear made her restless. She kept shifting her weight, clutching her phone, looking over her shoulder as if expecting another call. The bailiff watched her closely, not suspiciously, protectively. He could see the panic behind her movements. But then came stage 2 of the escalation. She sighed a long, frustrated exhale when the judge repeated the date she had missed. It wasn't directed at him, but to a viewer across the room, it looked like she was dismissing the judge, as if the process itself was an inconvenience. A few people exchanged judgmental glances. Judge Caprio remained calm. "I'm just explaining the record for clarity." "I know," she replied quickly. It's been a lot." Her voice cracked on the last word. But the courtroom didn't hear the crack, only the impatience. Then stage 3 arrived in the subtlest, saddest way. She ran a hand over her forehead, whispering, "This is why people hate dealing with this stuff," under her breath. She didn't mean the judge. She meant life. Bills, tickets, jobs, sick children, the entire avalanche she was silently drowning under. But the words floated into the mic just enough. The judge heard it. The courtroom heard it. Caprio didn't react. Not yet. But his expression shifted, Not angry, not offended, concerned. The final stage came moments later. Her phone buzzed again, and this time, in a panic, she lifted it and muttered, "I told them not to call during this." Completely forgetting the setting, the eyes on her, and the weight of the courtroom's decorum. Someone in the room let out a faint, "Oh, come on." The bailiff stepped forward just half a step. A tiny movement that signaled the situation needed grounding. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, the calm authority in him rising. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I need you to focus here." She froze. That sentence, simple, steady, firm, cut through the buzzing anxiety around her. "Put the phone away for now. We'll address your situation, but I need your full attention so we can resolve this properly." No anger, no scolding, just a gentle but undeniable boundary. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She placed the phone face down on the podium, as if it were suddenly the heaviest object she owned. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I really am." The room fell quiet. Tension had risen, patience had thinned, misunderstandings had multiplied, but Judge Caprio hadn't raised his voice once. His authority was calm, measured, and waiting. A storm had formed, and everyone could feel that something was about to shift. The courtroom settled into a heavy silence as the single mother lowered her eyes, her fingers trembling slightly on the edge of the podium. Judge Caprio looked at her with that careful balance he was known for. Empathy in his eyes, authority in his posture. He took a breath and continued. "Ma'am, the reason we're here today is simple. You missed your court date. And now, the fine has increased. I need to understand why." She nodded, but the nerves flooded back in. I told the clerk last time that I couldn't come because my son was sick and I didn't have anyone to watch him. Nobody listens. Nobody ever listens to me." The last sentence slipped out sharper than she intended. It wasn't disrespect. It was exhaustion, shaped into frustration. But spoken inside a courtroom, it landed heavier than she realized. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. There it was. The moment the entire room felt the shift. A quiet ripple went through the audience. Even the bailiff straightened his stance, sensing the sudden change in tone. To some, it sounded like she was blaming the court. To others, it sounded like she was challenging the system itself. Caprio didn't react immediately. He gave her a moment, not to dig the hole deeper, but to breathe. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "Ma'am, I'm listening now." His tone was calm, but it carried a firmness that settled the air. She looked up, realizing she had crossed an invisible line, not a rule of law, but a rule of respect. And yet, his response wasn't anger. It was a doorway back to stability. He leaned slightly forward. "But I need you to understand something. In this courtroom, we speak to each other with patience. I am here to help you if I can, but you must let me." Her lips trembled. She nodded quickly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way." Judge Caprio's calm authority filled the room, not loud, not forceful, but unmistakable. The power had shifted back to where it belonged, not through intimidation, but through composure. He folded his hands. "All right, let's start again." The storm in the room softened instantly. Even the audience seemed to exhale at once. And for the first time since she entered, the single mother's shoulders eased, just slightly, as if a tiny piece of the weight she carried finally slipped off. Judge Caprio adjusted his glasses and turned back to the file, his voice calm and measured, the tone of someone guiding, not punishing. "Ma'am, here's what we're dealing with," he began. "You had an original parking violation. Nothing serious. But when you missed the court date, the fine increased." She nodded, swallowing hard. Her eyes flickered to her phone, now silent, and then back to the judge. Caprio continued, laying everything out clearly, step by step. The base fine was $25. Missing your appointment added another $20. Then late fees brought it to a total of $75. A quiet gasp came from someone in the room. For many, $75 wasn't life-changing. For her, it was groceries, gas, a week of childcare. The mother whispered, "I didn't have the money then. I barely have it now." Judge Caprio wasn't surprised. He'd heard these stories before, but each one mattered. "I understand," he said gently. "But accountability is not optional. Life gets difficult, but the law still requires you to appear or let us know you can't." She lowered her head, absorbing the truth without arguing this time. "But," Caprio added, and the room lifted slightly, "your conduct today is also part of the equation." Her face tightened. She braced herself. He continued, calm but firm. "You talked over the court several times. You brought a phone to the podium and kept checking it. I believe you were overwhelmed, not intentionally disrespectful, but still, it affected the proceedings." She nodded quickly, shame rising in her cheeks. "I know, Your Honor. I'm really sorry." Judge Caprio paused, then delivered his ruling. "I'm going to reinstate the fine to its original amount, $25. The additional penalties will be waived." A few murmurs of surprise echoed in the courtroom. "But," he added softly, "I'm doing this because I believe your situation is difficult, not because the rules didn't matter. Next time you must communicate with the court." Her eyes filled instantly. Relief, gratitude, and exhaustion blended together. "I will, Your Honor. I promise." Caprio nodded once. The message was clear. Fairness doesn't erase responsibility. It balances it. For the first time since she walked into the courtroom, the single mother finally let herself breathe. Her shoulders dropped as if she'd been holding the world in place with sheer tension alone. She wiped the corner of her eye quickly, hoping no one noticed. But everyone did, and no one judged her for it. "Thank you, truly," she whispered, her voice smaller now, softer, not rushed, not defensive, just real. Judge Caprio watched her closely, the way a father might watch a daughter trying not to fall apart in public. He didn't say anything right away. He let the silence settle just enough for her to steady herself. "I didn't mean to disrespect the court," she continued. "I was scared and embarrassed. I'm doing everything alone right now, and sometimes it just comes out wrong." Her voice cracked again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was honesty. The courtroom, which had felt tense and judgmental earlier, seemed to soften around her. A few people looked down at their shoes. One woman in the back nodded slowly, understanding more than a stranger ever should. The bailiff, who had been watching her throughout the hearing, relaxed his stance. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly, his tone gentle. "I appreciate you saying that," he said. "It takes strength to admit when you're overwhelmed. Many people don't." She lowered her gaze once more, her hands clasped tightly. "I'm sorry, Your Honor, truly, and thank you for being patient with me." Caprio gave a slow nod, not dramatic, not performative, just sincere. "You're doing the best you can," he told her, "and that matters." The moment washed through the room like a quiet exhale. The tension melted, the misunderstanding dissolved, and the woman who had walked in, anxious, frantic, and on the verge of breaking, now stood humbled, calmer, and visibly lighter. The apology wasn't just accepted, it was understood. Judge Caprio took a moment before speaking, letting the emotion in the room settle into something quiet and meaningful. His voice, when it finally came, carried the calm authority of someone who'd seen thousands of stories and understood the humanity inside each one. "Ma'am," he began softly, "life doesn't always give us perfect timing. Sometimes it piles everything on one person at the same moment. Work, children, bills, responsibilities. And when it does, even good people stumble." She looked up, eyes still glistening. "But there's something important I want you to remember," he continued. "Character counts more than currency. You showed up today. You told the truth. You owned your mistakes. That speaks louder than any fine ever could." His words filled the courtroom, steady and fatherly. Respect costs nothing and changes everything. You came in here carrying a heavy load, and yes, the stress showed. But you stopped, you apologized, and you found your composure. That is what integrity looks like under pressure. He paused, giving the room a moment to absorb it. Some people walk into this courtroom believing that success or status buys them a discount on decency. They think rules bend for them. But you walked in overwhelmed, not entitled. Success doesn't buy you a pass, but humility always earns you understanding. The mother's chin trembled, and she looked down again, this time not from shame, but from feeling seen. Judge Caprio finished with a soft, timeless reminder. In this courtroom, we don't just judge actions. We look at circumstances, intent, and heart. You're trying, and trying counts. The room felt lighter, not because the fine was reduced, but because compassion had spoken louder than punishment. As the single mother stepped back from the podium, the courtroom watched her with a different set of eyes. Not the judging eyes she feared when she walked in, but human ones. The shift was subtle, but powerful, and it raises a question that reaches far beyond a small courtroom in Providence. Have you ever seen someone lash out, not because they were entitled, but because they were exhausted, scared, or simply doing life alone? It's easy to mistake struggle for disrespect. It's easy to assume someone doesn't care, when in reality, they care so much it breaks them. Moments like this remind us that behind every missed appointment, every late payment, every rushed apology, there's a story we don't always see. So ask yourself, what would you have done in her place? And more importantly, how many people around us are carrying a weight we never notice? As she walked out of the courtroom, the single mother carried the same responsibilities she came in with, but her spirit was lighter. She had been heard, understood, and treated with dignity. And in Judge Caprio's courtroom, that means everything. She learned that in Judge Caprio's courtroom, respect is earned, never bought. If you believe justice and compassion belong together, you're in the right place. Subscribe for more stories where real people, real struggles, and real empathy remind us that humanity is always louder than anger. And sometimes one gentle moment can change an entire day.